Welcome to the Nonprofit Coach and Everything DAF podcast, the show that unites leading voices in philanthropy, finance, and nonprofit strategy to help donors, their advisors, and the charities they support thrive. Your host today is Ted Hart, one of the foremost nonprofit thought leaders and the author of the DAF Revolution, making a difference in our modern world. Each episode features top experts sharing insider tips and real-world strategies in a lively conversational style, whether you're seasoned in the sector or just starting out. Ted lectures around the world, and now he's here for you. Here's Ted Hart.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Nonprofit Coach and Everything DAF. I'm your host, Ted Hart, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by a national leader in philanthropic technology, donor-advised fund innovation, and charitable asset management. He's one of the most trusted voices in donor-advised funds. Joe Fisher is president and CEO of REN, the premier independent philanthropic technology firm in North America, now entrusted with over $20 billion in charitable assets, and has been selected by many prominent donor-advised funds as their strategic partner in expanding innovation and regulatory compliance. I'm also pleased to share with everyone that Joe has authored the Foreword to the DAF Revolution, setting the tone for our conversation today. So Joe, welcome here to the Nonprofit Coach and Everything DAF.
Thanks for having me. And I think maybe boomerang back to you, congratulations. I've read through the transcript of the book, and it's great to be here on launch day. And I think you're doing a great service for the industry. And I think a lot of people are going to benefit from what you put together. But thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. Joe, this, as you mentioned, is a big day. You've encouraged me and helped inspire me for many months. Today is our official launch day, as you mentioned, of the DAF Revolution, making a difference in our modern world. It's available on Amazon and all major book-selling platforms in both hardcover and ebook version. And soon we'll be making the announcement for the audiobook version as well. So Joe, thank you. But why is today in this book important for donors, nonprofits, advisors, and DAF sponsors?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important because if you look at what is happening just not only, down the street from us in our nation, but across the world, there's so many people in need. There's so many struggles. And to me, a lot of times the solution is the charitable heart of an individual, a human, right? And people struggle with understanding how in a lot of cases, right? They want to be philanthropically inclined and they don't know how to do it. They don't know what tools are out there. So I see that there's just so much education and awareness for everybody involved in this ecosystem. And so, your tool, your book, but also spreading the gospel around charitable giving and all the different avenues that exist. I think we're early in the industry. We're early in the space. And to the extent that we can start to spread that word, we're going to have a very positive impact and imprint on this world by and large. So I think that's why it's so critical.
That's great. Joe, I mentioned earlier that you've written the foreword to the book, and I'm not going to spoil it for everyone. They should buy the book and read your excellent foreword. But I do want to share one short excerpt and ask you to expand on it for our listeners. You wrote, "Ted does not shy away from tough questions, whether about payout rates, policy, or self-regulation. Instead, he offers a framework for advisors, donors, nonprofits, and policymakers to evaluate DAFs thoughtfully. Most importantly, he never loses sight of the human heart of philanthropy." Now, there's a lot going on in running an effective donor-advised fund, but in your foreword, you put a special emphasis on the human heart, which is exactly why I made sure that a heart is on the very center of the front cover of this book. Can you share why this emphasis is so important?
Yeah, I think if you look at ultimately, people will say, well, why are people philanthropic? Right. And to me, at the core, there's a personal value or purpose that somebody has, and or there's some type of emotional connection, right? It could be for a moral or religious belief that is inherent in the individual. It could be they've experienced personally something in their lifetime, right? That they've lived through, a loved one has lived through. Um, and so I think if you really unpack why people give, to me, a lot of times it comes down to the human element, really at the core. Now, you'll see, depending on where you sit, right? I always like to think, depending on where you sit drives what you see. But I think for me, that's really the aperture that I look at philanthropy and why people get. And I think you hit on the human element, the human heart element of really what drives the core of philanthropy and why we see the dramatic growth. The thing is, how do we expose more and more people to the tools that exist, right? And I think that's part of what your book hits on, right? Is like, how do we continue to build education, right? It's like people talk about financial literacy growing up. Well, what about philanthropic literacy and and how can I execute and make that part of my natural cycles, whether it's weekly or monthly on an annual basis versus just episodic? And I think the human element is a great angle to be tackling this from.
Joe, you and I had the opportunity to sit down and to discuss these topics and many others related to donor advised funds. In addition to writing the foreword in the DAF Revolution, you're quoted as helping understand, as you just said, the opportunity to understand philanthropy in a very different way. Something that you said was really profound and seemed to have a bit of a difference to it. And I wanted to ask you to help our listeners understand why decoupling the tax benefit from strategic giving was a game changer. It gave donors a breathing room to think about their philanthropic goals rather than rushing to find a recipient. What does the central feature of donor advised funds matter, and why was this a game changer?
Yeah, well, I think, for me, I just so you know, and you know this, but, it's 25 years in building and running and scaling businesses and companies, right? And when you start to think about anything at scale, I love to start with a strategy, right? What is your vision and what is your strategy, right? And then you can move to execution, right? And to me, if you solely start with the tax element, right, that's to me episodic, one time. It's about execution. But if you step back and say strategically, what is the end in mind? What are we trying to accomplish? And that could be have an arc of a week. It could have an arc of a year. It could be multi-generational. And I think the beauty of a DAF is it allows you to open that dialogue and think about the arc of multiple years and how I want to make an impact, not only in my generation, but maybe for my kids and grandkids. And so I think separating just, hey, we want to comply or leverage tax code to strategically, what do we want to do? And make that impact. It really allows you to think much bigger and at scale and have repetition around what you're trying to do with donor advised funds.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to take a little bit of a different look at donor advised funds. I'm going to ask Joe what Dr. Seuss might have to say about DAFs, and we'll be right back.
If you're enjoying this conversation and want to learn more, the DAF Revolution is your practical guide to turning donor-advised funds into real impact. Packed with insights from over 120 experts, including today's guest, it covers philanthropy, finance, law, nonprofits, and technology. Get the DAF Revolution now on Amazon or wherever you buy your favorite books.
And we're back. Joe, when we sat down, you helped us look into the future, and you said AI will help philanthropy hyper-personalize. Imagine an AI agent recommending grants, tracking impact, and educating donors in real time, like a financial advisor for giving. Well, you didn't just talk about AI, you put it to work. I understand that you asked ChatGPT to tell the story of donor advised funds, and what it came up with was a whimsical donor advised land in a style of Dr. Seuss. And let me just share a couple of lines of that story that you had ChatGPT put together. In a land not far away, where giving hearts come out to play, there lies a fund, both wise and grand, known as donor advised land. With heart and imagination, it takes its place, making the world a better, kinder space. Why did you decide to explore DAFs in this way? And what do you think it says about the role AI might be able to play in inspiring generosity?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I haven't looked at that probably in the 2 years that I asked OpenAI and ChatGPT, and I'm sure the models have evolved significantly since I did that. The question is, would the answer be different? Would it be better? But I think a lot of times around anything tax related, anything government related, anything where there's compliance and legal, a lot of times people get scared. There's a fear. They think about the complexity. And I think what we need to do is take the fear out of giving and take the complexity out of giving. And, my orientation for the last 25 years has been around technology. So how do we leverage technology to remove friction from giving and remove friction from donor advised funds? And how do we accelerate the growth in philanthropy? How do we accelerate the growth in donor advised funds? And part of that is lowering the barriers, lowering the friction, demystifying anything that might prevent somebody from giving. And so if you can put the tools, the power in the hands of the donor and the tools and the power in the hands of the advisors and make that experience so ultra easy, what's going to happen? You're going to see acceleration of donor advised funds, the growth in philanthropy, and really the acceleration of money moving to charities, right? So part of it was, how do we democratize giving? How do we bring more people into giving circles? And if you can make it, like I said, fun and not intimidating, you'll see growth in the number of people participating, the amount of money moving, and the velocity that it moves to charities, right? And that to me gets really exciting. If we can do that collectively as an ecosystem, I think we'll start to move more and more money into charities throughout the world. And you've seen some of that in your past life and past experiences as well, right? Why do people a lot of times not do something? Fear of the unknown. They think it's too hard, right? The friction that exists. So we've got to lower all of those barriers so that we get more and more people, organizations involved. And so part of the chat GPT was, hey, let's start to leverage technology more and more as a power for good in what we're trying to do.
When we sat down, you had very much that same approach, and I very much appreciated the emphasis that you placed on advisors. In fact, you said advisors don't need to be experts on DAFs. They just need to know the right questions to ask. Philanthropy is a bridge to multi-generational relationships and community engagement. That's a pretty powerful perspective. And as you just said, taking the friction out, taking the mystery away. Can you walk our listeners through, and particularly our listeners who are advisors, through what it means when you say that they don't have to have all the answers? They need to know the right questions to ask?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the advisors are, probably one of the most significant or important connective tissues to philanthropy because, and the smart thing is the industry has leveraged them as a vast distribution model, right? That are tapped into well, right? A lot of times we look at them as in a different light, but in no other business have you seen such a productive, efficient distribution model that's a connective tissue. Now, so let's view them as a bridge, but like you said, they don't have to have all the answers, right? But if they know the qualifying, engaging questions to ask their donor, their client, and on the flip side, they know how to access the information, right? And there's philanthropic advisors that exist in the ecosystem. There's tools that exist in the ecosystem that are at their disposal to tap into, to be the bridge to carry back the answers, right? To the strategic planning around philanthropy. And I think that's the way that we should look is, hey, let's empower them at tier one on what are the logical questions to engage and get their clientele thinking about philanthropy. And then as you get more advanced, there's a whole set of resources right? A whole ecosystem of philanthropic advisors that they can tap into to bring into that discussion, to bring into that equation, to start to really think more and more strategic about philanthropic giving for that constituency.
And then, of course, tying it back to our purpose of today is we now have the DAF Revolution and making a difference in our modern world. And a book in chapter 5 in the DAF Revolution, specifically written for donor advised fund advisors and helping clients and nonprofits succeed. What are some of the best questions that can help get that dialogue going if you want to help your clients be successful in philanthropy?
Yeah, I think the easy ones are, what are your goals, right? Back to I was saying is, are you interested in philanthropy? And 99 out of 100 times the answer will be yes, right? And then, is it around purpose? Is it around your values? Do you have certain moral or religious beliefs? Are you altruistic? Do you just have a sense of core responsibility, uh, to leverage your resources to impact your community, right? So you can start to just kind of get to know your client at a different level. And in a lot of cases, the advisors do. Back to, is there some level of emotional connection that really drives your thinking and your behavior, right? And so those are some of the early things that you can start to think about. I think, from where I sit, is to start to think about, is it important that you connect with your kids? Is it important that you start to connect with your grandkids? Right? So multi-generational connectivity. And how do you stay connected to them, not just on TikTok or Snapchat or all the social media networks, but more importantly, down at the core, right? And start to get them to think about philanthropy as well and giving back if you're fortunate enough to be in that position. So I think those are some of the dialogues and questions, and advisors become some of the, you know, they say trusted, but they're a trusted advisor on so many levels. They get to know their clients a lot of times more than their doctors, right? And they have more conversations with them. They know their kids well. So there's so many opportunities to start to build the definition out of being a trusted advisor. And I think that's where philanthropy and understanding some of their beliefs, desires, and objectives just sits square in that for them to start to ask questions and open up that dialogue. And I just think the next generational connectivity is just so important.
Joe, you had mentioned earlier that, sort of where you sit is what you see. And you also mentioned in the foreword that I don't shy away from some of the tough questions. And there are those who criticize donor advised funds for not moving money fast enough, even though, as we know, the data sort of belies that, in that donor advised funds are moving many multiples of percentages of assets out the door than, say, private foundations do. But if your perspective is that money just goes directly to charities, then you're taking the donor out of the equation and the opportunity for them to be thoughtful instead of just reacting in the moment. And some of the topics that we cover in the book are saving now for donating during your retirement, saving now, as you mentioned, to involve your children and your grandchildren so that perhaps this is an opportunity for legacy and multiple generations to be involved. So it's not just about giving now, but can you speak to that point of what looks like money just staying in an account is many times a very thoughtful strategy?
Yeah, I think, and I love those chapters and what you authored in there because, being at the core, I'm a business leader, right? And I typically think about results and I think about impact, right? And then ultimately, what's our objective or goal? What are we solving for? And what I love about the motion of DAFs is it really allows across those different stakeholders, if you will, is to say, what are our objectives? What are we solving for? And how do we thoughtfully connect those dots? And a lot of times, I think what happens is if you push money too fast, too early, do they have the ability to digest it and really optimize the impact? And that's where I like to see donors working with advisors, working with philanthropic advisors, and working with charities. right? So you get the entire spectrum or continuum involved in the dialogue and say, how fast can we push? How fast can you consume? And then how do we measure impact, right? Even at the charity level, their objectives and initiatives are quite fluid, right? And they change over time, year to year. What are they solving for? And so making sure that you've got alignment across the spectrum, I think is really, really important. And the flexibility and the power of a donor advised fund allows you to optimize across that spectrum and across that continuum. And the key thing across that is communication, right? I think you hit on that a lot in the optimization of that continuum, the different stakeholders involved, and really optimizing impact. Ultimately, the goal is how do we continue to grow philanthropy? And the more we do that holistically, the more money that's going to flow to charities.
I agree. Joe, I think you know I'm a big baseball fan, and I want to take our listeners back to something that you said when we first started this podcast today and sort of put that in the context of baseball. And a quote that you gave me, and you said, if this is a 9-inning baseball game, donor advised funds, we've just thrown out the first pitch. The potential for DAFs is enormous, especially as wealth created by AI-driven industries enters philanthropic ecosystem. Wow, just the first pitch. As we launch the DAF Revolution book today, what lies ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are collectively as an ecosystem, we are so fortunate to be where we're at. Because not only is it early, but we have the ability, all of us collectively, to really make an imprint, an impact in how the next 9.5 innings, if you will, play out, right? How do we really be thoughtful around technology and leverage it? How do we put in place the right guardrails and guidelines that allow us to optimize the money and the velocity of it flowing? And as you and I have talked, there's a few, I wouldn't say paradigm shifts, but really big catalytic events that are happening right now in our world, right? There's the wealth transfer. And depending on what you pick up, it says 85 to, 85 trillion that's going to move over the next 15 to 20 years, a high percentage of that moving to philanthropy. Well, we have a responsibility, not only an obligation, a responsibility to really figure out and determine how that money movement is done thoughtfully and done in a way that optimizes impact. We also, as you know, a number of companies are raising, billions of dollars are moving into AI companies that are creating wealth at a rapid rate, right? Everybody talks about NVIDIA has created the most millionaires in the last 50 years. They become high net worth individuals that have the opportunity to move to philanthropy, move money to philanthropy. M&A is thriving, IPO market's thriving, but all of that is good. But what's important is how do we, back to why the book's so important, how do we lower the fear factor? How do we lower the barriers? How do we remove the friction and put in place the right things that allow all that money that should move to philanthropy actually do, right? I think DAF is one of the great vehicles. It's not the only vehicle, but it's a great vehicle that can be optimized to democratize giving for this generation, the next generation, and generations to come to make a huge and positive impact on this world. So very exciting times. But like I said, whether it's the first pitch, if we've just moved to the bottom of the first, I think there's a lot of time, but we also, it's exciting, but we have a major responsibility as all stakeholders in this ecosystem. And I think your book is so timely to be hitting the press or hitting the market today. And if you're any of those stakeholders inside the ecosystem or sitting outside, it should be a must read sitting on the desk. And, if you follow what everybody's saying, you got to focus on sleep and meditation and read a chapter a day. They should pick it up and spend time on it over the next couple months.
That's great. Joe, thank you so much for being here and for your assistance in not only launching the DAF Revolution today, but for making the DAF Revolution a reality. Thank you for the vital work that you do every day and your leadership that you bring to every facet of donor advised funds. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to follow us wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And as Joe and I have been talking about today, pick up your copy of the DAF Revolution, Making a Difference in Our Modern World, available now on Amazon or wherever you buy your favorite books. Until next time, I'm Ted Hart, and this is the Nonprofit Coach and Everything DAF.
You've been listening to the Nonprofit Coach and Everything DAF with Ted Hart. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you enjoy your favorite shows. And don't forget to pick up Ted's newest book, The DAF Revolution, available now on Amazon and at booksellers everywhere. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Nonprofit Coach.